In today's video, I'm going to be focusing on an article and a study which suggests that through mental practices we can control our DNA. Now, as I go into it a little bit, the whole idea of us controlling our DNA through our thoughts is something that a lot of people would catalog as something new age, as some complete nonsense, and so on and so forth. But these are studies that are out there, and everybody can access them from 2014. And there's a lot of people talking about these things, and it ties a little bit into what I've been talking about in my previous videos, dealing with the whole concept of quantum consciousness. In the previous video, I speak about the Orquart theory, this idea that there's information within the cells of the brain. Now, the whole idea of us being able to control our DNA with our thoughts has to do with this mind-body connection that our current society tries to deny so vehemently. As I mentioned, it's usually the older generations who are really against this idea and are unable to accept this and to catalog anything as just a new age nonsense and so on and so forth, despite the fact the studies are out there. And in these studies have to do more with cancer treatments and how these mindfulness meditations actually show improvements. I go into it, and I'm going to be speaking about the implications about having this mind-body duality removed into singularity instead of duality, meaning that if we accept the connection of the mind-body phenomenon, it'll help our understanding of some of the other things that I've been speaking in this channel. The whole idea of this quantum consciousness, perhaps, and this idea that we are not our bodies and there's something else than physical matter. It'll be easier to achieve this if we look into the research and we start to speak about the implications and accept the facts of this phenomenon. Before I move forward, I would like to remind you that if you want to join the growing discussion on consciousness and would like to be notified on the latest scientific discoveries and theories surrounding this topic and how they connect to ancient mythologies and philosophies, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, as I'll try to upload at least one video per week as I continue with the outline. Alright, so today I'm going to be looking at this article here, changing our DNA through mind control. A study finds meditating cancer patients are able to affect the makeup of their DNA. Now, I found this this article on Scientific American. Scientific American is sort of like a sciencey tabloid sort of deal. I found some other articles, and I found the one from Bruce Lipton, and this whole idea of that through your mind, through your thoughts, you can control your reality, you can control your body and whatnot. It seems a lot of people are just discarding all of this as just new age, woo-woo, how they call it and whatnot, and it makes sense. And I find it nowadays that I've been posting and talking about these subjects that a lot of the people who are saying this are mostly people who are on their latter years, people who grew up reading textbooks about science in the 90s and so on and so forth. And what I've been saying is that in the last 10 years, we have this surge of, number one, in the way we share information, number two, in the technology that we have to start going through these studies. And these are small studies, controlled studies that go underrated, go under the radar. And this is why I'm not going to be looking at the main articles right now. But I found this article and I found it really interesting. And there's a study, a couple of studies actually attached to it, and it's sort of underrated. Nobody really pays attention to this. As soon as they hear, they read the idea of us shifting our DNA through our mind, through our thoughts, they completely discard it, thinking it's just nonsense and whatsoever. But there's actually a couple of studies which I'm going to be posting in this video, and I'm going to be going into attached to it. And this is December 16, 2014. At the moment of making this video, it's been 8 years since these studies were released, but till today we found people saying that all of this is nonsense, new age nonsense, and so on and so forth. But as I said, when I'm making these videos on ongoing research, I'm gonna be linking to the studies, so you can find the studies right below. It has to do with cancer survivors, mindfulness based cancer recovery, and supportive expressive therapy maintain telomere length relative to controls in distressed breast cancer survivors. Telomere length, this is in the DNA, and there's another one that is sort of linked to it. It has to do with whether improvements in nutrition and lifestyle could improve health in people. So the whole idea of lifestyle, what really is lifestyle? They talk about emotional support, about social interaction, and so on and so forth. But this one that I'm going to be reading goes into this concept of mindfulness. This is another of those trigger words. Mindfulness is sort of like this new age nonsense, woo-woo, so on and so forth. Has to do with meditation. A lot of people straight up discard these theories, but I think when you have certain studies that are looking into cancer treatment, which is a plague in our current society, you have to take everything into account, especially when the results, the conclusions show that indeed we can affect our very DNA through mind control. Alright, so the article starts going with, I think, therefore I am, is perhaps the most familiar one-liner in Western philosophy, even if the stoners, philosophers, and quantum mechanically inclined skeptics who believe we're living an illusion are right. So it's the whole idea that these new age woo-woo people and the quantum nonsense, we're living in an illusion, holographic universe. I spoke about this in one of my previous videos. A few existential quips hit with such profound, approachable simplicity. The only catch is that in the Kant opinion, our thoughts, our personalities, our minds are mostly divorced from our bodies. So this is the whole thing here. This is why I wanted to bring this I wanted to make this video about this. I've been talking about this idea of a quantum consciousness. I've been talking about this idea that through our mind, the information within our mind is out there in the world, and then there's this larger field of consciousness. That's the whole idea that we are looking into. So our current society, as I just said, a lot of the criticism that comes from, as I said, people in their latter years mostly, and I say that in regard of not generalizing everything, we have this idea that our bodies are divorced from what we call our minds. Who are us? As I've been saying this about how we look at the brain as an external entity. Oh, the brain does this and that. Who is looking at this brain? Who is us? Who is we? What is really our mind? Is divorced from our body. So as I mentioned, I was gonna start going into epigenetics and this whole idea of some of the main counter arguments to some of the ideas that I've been speaking about in this channel are that, oh, okay, this is because the parents, I made that video on the mammals who dream about the world before being alive, just arguing that there's this information all over the place and within our brains, within our minds, and with the whole unified field of, you can call it whatever, consciousness, unified field of unified quantum field, so on and so forth, call it whatever you want. And there's that theory that I spoke about in that previous video on the theory of the soul by Penrose and Hameroff, that there is this information within the cells in our brains, which they are the receptors for quantum information, and perhaps this is how consciousness is made. Now, so we have these newer studies, or these not so new studies that are out there saying that also with our mind we can control the very DNA where all this information might be located. So I think we are onto something right here. What if our thoughts, our minds, were not divorced from our bodies, but is part of the same thing? Alright, so here's the lead investigator, Dr. Linda E. Carlson. They found that right here is the study. If you click this link, it will show you to the study. That in breast cancer patients support group, this important support group, involvement, and mindfulness meditation. Now, this idea of support group, I've talked about it in the past. It has to do with how we're all really connected, and this is one of the themes that is coming from the bulk of the research, that we're all really connected, and the ideas of others can affect affect us, and also the interaction with others can affect us positively if there's reinforcement, if there's help. So the whole thing, the whole study is not actually to prove that our DNA, well, I mean, kind of is, that we are modifying our DNA with our thoughts, but the whole idea is to improve care in cancer patients. That's why these studies exist. So what they are finding is tying into something else, into, as I've been saying, like, this is not going to prove anything on its own. But when you talk about this idea of our minds affecting our very DNA, and then you tie that with some of the other theories on the soul, as I spoke about, I'm going to link it somewhere on the screen, or you can find all of these videos below. I haven't even posted that video, so I'm not talking a lot about it, but that is one of the most important videos that I'm going to be making and talking about, the Or theory from Penrose and Hameroff. If you take all of that with the bulk of the research in near experiences, OBEs, psychedelics, so on and so forth, you kind of start drawing a picture of what's going on. So the support group, the society at large, and mindfulness meditation, an adapted form of Buddhist meditation in which practitioners focus on present thoughts and actions in a non-judgmental way, ignoring past grudges and future concerns, are associated with preserved telomere length. Telomeres are stretches of DNA that cap our chromosomes and help prevent chromosomal deterioration. Biology professors often liken them to the plastic tips on shoelaces. Shortened telomeres aren't known to cause a specific disease per se, but they do wither with age and are shorter in people with cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and high stress levels. We want our telomeres intact. So that's what they're saying. True. This mindfulness meditation, the support group activity, these telomeres, which are part of our DNA, are kept intact, are preserved. Now, when they wither with age, when they are shortened, it could be a sign of disease or just aging in general, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and high stress levels. We talked about stress levels. So this concept of stress levels, I made a video about the placebo effect lately. My latter video on the placebo effect, I went a little bit in depth, and right there it is. I go into this argument because a lot of people say, of course, if you reduce the stress levels and reduce inflammation, a general improvement in health is going to be noticed, which is correct. But at the same time, in those studies regarding the placebo effect can also go negative. And if people believe that a specific result is going to be achieved, that result happens. When they told people that they might become infertile, that specific, this was a control group. There was no real, it was a sugar pill, and they thought they were going to become infertile, and they showed that they became infertile. So this is not a simple reaction by reducing or increasing stress. These are very specific things that are mainly managed by the minds of the subjects. It's so interesting. I'm gonna link that video somewhere on the screen. I go in depth into it. Another interesting thing about that, what I speak about that video, is that they found that the ability to think about the future is key in the triggering of this placebo effect. So it has to do with the thought process itself. Now, what this research is proving that it's not only about stress levels, and it's not only about inflammation, which promotes a healthier life. It goes literally into the DNA. The results go into the DNA. Alright, so what actually happened in this study was there were 3 groups. The first group was randomly assigned to an 8-week cancer recovery program consisting of mindfulness, meditation, and yoga. So this is the main and new age sort of group, which went straight into just mindfulness for 8 weeks. The length is important. The second, it was a little bit longer, 12 weeks of group therapy in which they shared difficult emotions and fostered social support. So now this second one is not about mindfulness, it's not about meditation, it's simply about dealing with emotions and fostering social support, engaging in positive thinking through this social support, which people help each other. They create new patterns, new ways of thinking through helping each other. This idea of social support is huge. I talked about it when I made those videos about energy healing and the factors of the society at large, given the fact that perhaps we're all connected somehow, and the ideas of others can affect us either positively or negatively, and the idea of the ancient rituals and how the whole society construct should be involved in the healings as well as the subject themselves. But it also had to do with the simple idea that they are promoting positive thinking through social support. So you don't have to become a Buddhist, you don't have to become a New Age mindful meditation and do yoga and all these things. Simple positive reinforcements, positive thinking through the results. The third was the control group. The control group means that this is the sugar pill right here. A simple, basic 6-hour stress management course. This is a very Western-like approach to whatever illness or something like that. Like, it reminds me to companies just adding these little management courses. It was 6-hour stress management course. So this is 1 day, this is 12 weeks, and this is 8 weeks. The results were that the telomeres were maintained in both treatment groups, but shortened in control groups. So in this group, where they just had 1 day of a stress management course, their DNA was affected negatively. And in these first and second groups, where there was mindfulness, when there was meditation, where there was social support and positive thinking, their DNA was affected positively. The telomeres were maintained but shortened in the control group. They shortened, just leading into disease, leading into aging, leading into a negative response. Alright, so the article goes a little bit deeper into the earlier work of Carlson, the lead investigator in this study. Goes on to say that in cancer patients, mindfulness is associated with healthier levels of stress hormone, cortisol, and a decrease in compounds that promote inflammation. Moreover, as she points out, generally healthy people in a work-based mindfulness stress reduction program, which is this idea of meditation or positive thinking, positive reinforcement as well, but this is especially about mindfulness. This is literally meditation, have been shown to produce higher antibody titers to the flu vaccine than controls. So this is important to note, because I spoke about this in that previous placebo effect video that I did. I'm going to link it somewhere on the screen. You can find it below as usual. The thing that I was talking about there is that the whole idea of the placebo effect is not to replace medicine or conventional treatments. The idea is to boost conventional treatments, and this is what the science has brought forward. We have analyzed that if you just treat the whole idea is the mental and the physical, they both act together. This is what the argument is here. Both the mental and the physical effects are important. So the physical is the consequence of the mental. This is why all these doctors, as it goes on in the article, are saying the conventional doctors are going to the idea that all illnesses are created by stress. What is stress at the end of the day? It's a mental process. Is worrying about the future, worrying about anything, about work, whatever it is. So just increasing this stress is gonna lead the body to go into inflammation, and then this is gonna cause a lot of problems. But as I said in that video, it's not only about stress and it's not only about inflammation. It's about very specific effects that the placebo effect can trigger, both positively and negatively. If it was just about reducing stress to create wellness, then the placebo effect would only work positively. But what they found is the nocebo effect, which affects negatively. So that means there's an actual mental process going on, creating a specific result. But now what I was saying is that the whole idea is to have these mind-body treatments along with conventional treatments. So the flu vaccine is not that the vaccine is not doing anything. The vaccine is affecting the physical, it's affecting the consequences, and it can work because it modifies the physical consequences, and then the mind, the mental state, because there is such cases where the treatment is applied and the patient does not respond to a treatment. Why is this? It's because the mental is not affected. And there are situations where the mental is affected through a placebo effect, where the patient thinks they're going to be healed, and they heal miraculously. What they call these miraculous healings. What is the difference between patients who respond to cancer treatment and patients who do not respond? Could it be that the mental affects it? So if you both focus on affecting the mental through some sort of a placebo, or through the very understanding that our minds affect our body, and then you affect the physical with a conventional treatment, the result is almost guaranteed. And this is what they go into in that video that I posted, and this is some of the earlier work of Carlson right here. It's all pointing towards this idea that both the mental and the physical are hand in hand and not divorced as we have thought in our society. There has been promising work looking at the effects of mindfulness in HIV and diabetes. Past findings also show that high stress increases the risk of viral infections, including the common cold, as well as depression and cardiovascular disease. As I said, this is what the understanding of the new medical fields are beginning to understand. You go to a doctor, they're going to tell you need to reduce the stress because the stress is creating all your issues. There's an understanding that this mental process is affecting the physical. And as I said, this is not simply about inflammation. I go on it in that video. I talk also about the whole concept of psychotropic wellness. Just as there are psychotropic illnesses, there is psychotropic wellness. There's so much evidence on this. It's undeniable, but still people won't believe and will deny all of this. Alright, so I want to talk a little bit about the implications of what this study suggests and how does it relate with the topics of this channel, with this idea of quantum consciousness. So now, these studies are done in terms of cancer treatment, which is amazing. Even with just that, it should be worth to look into it and to do a thorough study into it, take it seriously and go with the research. But that is not the only implication in this. The implication when it comes to the idea that with our minds we can control the subatomic particles within our bodies. Subatomic particles, everything is made of subatomic particles. Now, there's the literature which suggests that even our very own DNA is the same as everything that the world is made of. And if we manage to, as previously mentioned on that theory of the soul, the video that I posted, the last video that I posted before this, can prove that indeed consciousness is created in these subatomic particles in the brain. And if they manage to prove that there's information, intelligence, design in these subatomic particles, then we are on to something. This is what the scientists currently don't know. They don't know what tells a particle to form a chair or to form a human heart. Now, there are some studies that I'm going to be going into about this topic, dealing with epigenetics, and it's very, very interesting. Now, we are looking into something here. We're not talking here about growing a limb out of nowhere just by thinking about it. Now, does that mean that in 1,000 years, when we are more evolved, when we understand more about our very reality, could it happen in some sort of a sci-fi scenario, going into fantasy, going into mythology, going into, can you grow a limb in your dreams? Can you fly? You cannot just jump off a building and think that you're gonna fly. I'm not saying that, but can you fly in your dreams? I'm talking about the idea that the literature is suggesting, the AS Altered State of Consciousness reports is suggesting, is that there are other realms of reality, and the physical reality we inhabit has very specific limits to it. However, it is under the same mechanics of reality at large, including the physical and the non-physical. What our current science is proving is what science once thought was impossible. Science once thought that the body acts on itself, the physical material world is one thing and the mind is another thing. What the current science is proving through, you can find the links below, through all these studies on the placebo effect, now through this study about DNA, and there are further studies going into DNA with that theory of consciousness, just going into the microtubules in the brain, learning that there's intelligence behind the subatomic particles that constitute not only us, but everything around in the world. and to think that there is the possibility that with our minds, with our thoughts, with who we are, with what we are, we can affect. As I said, as I spoke about this in that video, the experiment that cracked reality wide open, going into the double slit experiment. The argument here, the implication is that we can affect particles at the subatomic level. We might not be able to manifest a table out of nowhere, but can we reverse the effects of cancer, perhaps? Just like perhaps and most likely we created them either consciously or subconsciously by ourselves. This is the argument and this is the implication. If we keep going with the research and we realize that we can affect the subatomic particles in our bodies, this would be a huge realization and discovery, not only for the medical fields, but perhaps for the very mechanics of the reality we inhabit and the mysteries of who we really are. And to end it up, if, as some of the theories are suggesting, there is this quantum consciousness, there is this unified field, and as it's been proven by science that what constitutes our DNA is what constitutes reality at large. The trees, the grass, the air, everything, the animals, food. If we can modify the subatomic particles in our bodies with our thoughts, our mind, our very intentions, our very conscious intent, what the people doing the double slit experiment coined the observer effect, with what people are calling, and is the current biggest mystery in science and philosophy, quote-unquote, consciousness. What prevents us from affecting perhaps everything around? If you're on the path of finding the truth about reality and our purpose as humans on Earth, the information that I have to share concerns you. After a lifetime of research in philosophies ranging from Buddhism to the occult, I've encountered themes and patterns along some baffling information that is beginning to be seriously studied by science. Our Rational Divine Outline, The Ghost of Jesus, is the first iteration of this project, where I analyze the message of Jesus without dogmatism, fanaticism, or religious bias. You can find my work available on Amazon on the link below. If you find this work valuable, consider subscribing, sharing, and following me on social media, as it will help others in the same path to find this information. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.